Good afternoon, Minister. And may I just say at this point, I wish you well in your future, whatever that may be. I'm sure it'll be something that we'll come across one another again. Ceann Comhairle, many parents and families in Wexford throughout this crisis have expressed to me just how they truly miss the daily interactions with their childcare centres, and they express such huge regard and respect for the profession, valuing these relationships as an integral part of their family. And what I suggest today to the Minister is that the failure of the Department of Children and Youth Affairs to provide a set of clear guidelines so that the childcare providers, be they public or private, can decide on reopening is somewhat deplorable. There is a grave concern in the sector that it is being taken for granted by the Department, leaving them vulnerable by such lack of preparedness. Now, we're at phase 1 of the reopening, and childcare providers are unable to reassure parents and families as to how they will deliver care for their children in the weeks ahead. And they can't even inform their staff as to whether or not they're going to be returning to work. They need a clear, coherent plan for the reopening of the childcare sector. And government needs to show a real sense of urgency, as the provision of childcare is the backbone to many in the workforce being able to return to work. So can I ask you, Minister, to undertake in the next week to provide a clear protocol and set of guidelines to the childcare sector that guarantees a strategy for reopening and will ensure the health and safety of all involved? I forgot to say we're going to do back and forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can guarantee that we will have the protocols and clear guidelines. I don't think it'll happen in the next week, though. And that is what, one of the key things that I'm working on, both my officials and also with the advisory group, and then it will be the wider forms of consultation.
Can you note the urgency, Minister?
I never stop working on that.
Thank you.
And I'm unelected.
Thank you. So now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to beg to differ with you, something that many of my colleagues have broached with you already. So that is the advisory group and the acceptance of the Federation of Childhood Providers, Early Childhood Providers. I think the issue here is that none of my Wexford constituent providers were actually contacted in relation to who should join the advisory group. And I think you will find that there is partaking in the advisory group chasseus, who have 103 members, I'm informed, but leaving out the Federation, who represent some 1,400 members, will not result in reflecting what the providers require. And I think that I would caution the Minister here that this could turn out to be another fiasco, which is what we saw happened with what was supposed to be provided for frontline workers. And I'd ask you to reconsider that. But the question I have for you is, can you actually tell us why early childhood providers have been excluded? If you say that the process was that they were informed by the sector as to who was to represent, I have full Wexford constituency providers telling me they weren't consulted. So if you can, Minister, tell the House why they've been excluded.
Why, who's been excluded, Deputy?
The Federation of Early Childhood Providers.
I think I'm going to say, first of all, I appreciate your word, fiasco is your word. I wouldn't agree with that. And a lot of my presentation here over the last hour and a half, I think, has tried to point out why that is the case, and that we were operating within strict parameters of public health advice. The second thing is that I do believe I have already answered that question a couple of times in terms of over the past 4 years since I've been a minister, we established an early years forum. And that early years forum and a subgroup within that forum got together and recommended who would be on the advisory group, and that's who's on the advisory group. And I've also identified that in addition to hearing, and the Federation isn't the only group that feels that they have been excluded by their own peers. There are others, and I am setting up a reference group in order to get some more representation, in order to consult, in order to try to do the best job possible. But I'm sure the deputy would appreciate that within the time frame and also in the general process of designing things that need consultation, that it's not a, it is never, you can never absolutely consult with every single person.
Excuse me, Minister, I have to say that I don't accept that, and I'll tell you why.
I appreciate
a
that.
Subset. What you said originally was that the sector picked the advisory group.
Minister,
what you're now telling us is that the advisory group was picked from some section that was already there advising government, which meant the Federation were never considered in the first place. And I think what's important, Minister, and what I'd like you to note, particularly on behalf of my providers in Wexford, is that there are 1,400 members in the Federation. And if you want to reflect the requirements and have it accepted, I think you should reconsider. I really think that you should reconsider the Federation, not as part of the subset, but as part of the advisory group. Can I ask you for that commitment, Minister?
Minister.
I think the deputy would be aware, in terms of the way I've already answered the question, that I don't agree with her assessment of the situation. And I've already indicated, excuse me, Deputy, that I will be hearing directly from the Federation and others in the context of the reference group. That is my commitment.
Well, Minister, in that case, what I'd like you to do is commit to providing the actual criteria that was required for being a member of the advisory group for transparency. Thank you. Can you commit to that, Minister?
I didn't make the choices, so...
even if you didn't, maybe your department did.
Sorry?
Your department would have.
No, I didn't. No, they did. No, they didn't. Excuse me, Deputy. It was representatives of the sector who made the choice, who made the choices. It wasn't the department, Deputy.
Deputy Murphy.
Yeah, again, I think I'll have to write to the Minister on it and have it clarified in writing, because there seems to be certainly some consternation about why they're being excluded. So what I would like to ask the Minister, early childcare and educators play an important role in children's development and provide the valuable support for families and young children, particularly those in access and inclusion model, which is the AIM support scheme. Our most valuable children depend, our most vulnerable children depend, all children of course being valuable, on these services, but were effectively abandoned by the state when the funding was withdrawn during the COVID-19 emergency. It's essential that we ensure the standard of care. Continuity of care lies squarely with the state, not the providers in funding, if funding is withdrawn, and financial intervention by the state must be guaranteed as a part of the recovery strategy to ensure as many parents as possible can return to work. Can you inform the House of what funding you have sought to ensure continuity of service will be provided, and if you have received confirmation of that funding being granted by the Department of Finance?
Minister Zabone.
Excuse me, Deputy. I'm just not clear. Continuity of service in relation to?
In relation to the access and inclusion model, which the contracts were pulled a week after closure.
When the reopening, the phased reopening of the childcare centres begins to take place, yes, there are plans in order to identify how to support children with disabilities, and we need to consider that in the process of moving forward. And that will be part of the plans that we're devising.
Thank you, Minister. The many Wexford childcare providers that I've been in touch with have all voiced their concern as to the overbearing administration of the multiple agency inspection framework. A bigger concern, in fact, is the speculation that the Department of Children and Youth Affairs may be abolished by a new government at a time when the sector requires a comprehensive streamlining of the inspection framework. Can the Minister inform the House of the Department's intentions with regard to a streamlined process, if and when that might happen?
Minister.
Deputy, actually what I can say is that I formed a group there, this is just pre-election, of the relevant actors in order to take a look at how to move towards streamlining.
If I was to send you a correspondence, you might be able to inform me of what that is. Thank you.